Labor Talks was John DeRozier, recorded at Chippewa Valley Community Television in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Good day, this is Labor Talks. I'm John DeRozier, and today our guest is Florian Skrzynski. Now, I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
You did, John.
Okay. Now, here at Labor Talks, we talk about working family issues, unions, labor, and anything else we damn well want to talk about. Having said that, here's our first question, and just take your time with it, okay? Do the members of your union support expanded transit service in the city of Eau Claire?
They do.
Okay.
A little background, I guess, would be our union is the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 1310. We're the bus operators here in Eau Claire. And when we represent the mechanics and the servicemen and women too. The bus operators in Eau Claire are, I guess, like the first line of communication with our passengers that we have. And so we hear a lot, quite frequently, about different expansions that they are interested in having. And it's kind of three of the main expansions that they discuss are, number one, Sunday service. Our passengers would really love to see us go 7 days a week. Currently, we operate from 5:45 a.m. to 10:15 p.m. Monday through Friday, and Saturdays from 8:15 till 6:45 p.m. and then there is no service on the Sunday, and that's why our number one request would be to have Sunday service. Secondly, it would be to expand the hours of operation. It gets a little difficult sometimes for our passengers to be able to utilize our services both to and from work. If you work the afternoon shifts or evening shifts because of ending at 10:15, where typically you have your 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7 shifts. So you can get to work, but you can't get home. And so they would like the hours expanded till at least midnight. That way it gives them time to get out of work at 10, 10:30, 11 o'clock, and they're able to catch a bus to get back home. And then the third expansion would be to actually expand the service itself, which would be to expand the routes that we have to get to different parts of town, and to expand the frequency of service that we have. Some of the routes, when you get out to the outlying areas, especially to the north, can take well over an hour to get from point A to point B. And that gets to be a little long. And people rely on the Eau Claire transit system and transit systems across the state, as far as that goes, for their mode of transportation to do everything. Just, from the basics of just going to the grocery store and doctor's appointments to getting out to see a show, whatever it may be.
Now, I neglected to point out in my introduction that you are a former president of Transit Local 1310. And as of right now, you are the recording secretary.
Correct, yeah.
So, my apologies for that. Now, do the members of your union support expanded transit service outside of Eau Claire City, such as city to city? Because there is some talk about expanding the public transit system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they do. And that's another thing that we hear from our passengers, is that they would like to be able to get to other cities as well. About 5 or 6 years ago, our local and other transit locals across the state worked hand in hand with WURTA, which is the Wisconsin Urban and Rural Transit Association. And they're an association of what we consider the managers, each actual transit property. It's their organization that brings them all together, and we work side by side with them to get legislation passed in Wisconsin to enact RTAs, regional transit authorities. And that legislation did pass and was in place. And what that legislation was it allowed communities to form a rural transit authority, an RTA. Here in the Chippewa Valley was one. There was a Fox Valley RTA, which is the Green Bay, Appleton area. There was a Bay Area Transit Authority, which is up by Ashland, Superior area, and then the Milwaukee had one in place. Not in place, but the legislation was there for them to form an RTA. And the reasoning behind that was that would allow these areas, these communities, to enact as much as a 0.5% sales tax to use as a funding source for their transit system. With that 0.5% sales tax, that would have more than doubled the current funding that the transit systems have. And so we would have been able to expand into outlying areas. Here in particular in the Chippewa Valley, the talk was to be able to get into Chippewa Falls and then to Menominee and into even some of the outlying areas such as Fall Creek and Augusta. That legislation, like I said, did pass and was in place. And when Governor Walker was elected about 4 years ago now, he eliminated that with the swipe of a pen. So now we're back to where we were, where there is no RTA legislation, and so it's almost impossible to expand service now. Even though there's a great demand for it, it would be impossible just because the funding sources aren't there.
Yeah, I sense that with the excuse me, that with the price in gasoline, that you're getting more and more support, especially from young people, for public transit system. Is this what you're picking up?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, you can look at the numbers of ridership here within Eau Claire, and a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, we actually peaked out at our maximum. We hit an all-new high of it was over 1 million rides, and that's been down a little bit, but it's still over 1 million for the last 3 years here now running. And the reason, I guess, that it may have gone down a little bit from what I'm hearing is that it could be because the gas prices have dropped a little bit, the economy has come back, and so we do see a little bit less ridership. But there's still a large demand for transit.
Well, regarding negotiations, those are always fun, you know.
Oh, yes.
But do you believe, and do your union members believe, that they are treated with respect? That is, they're not just simply dismissed as pawns in the game.
No, not here in Eau Claire. We don't feel that. Whenever and I've sat in on several negotiations, several contracts, we are treated with respect as far as the communication that takes place. There's no swearing or yelling at each other across the table. Everything is very respectful. When it comes to being able to get what you want, no one ever gets really what they want. But we don't feel disrespected.
So they don't offer you a take it or leave it offer, a position?
No, not right off the bat. Negotiations typically take place for several months before we would ever get to an impasse, which has happened in the past. Many years ago that did happen, but in these recent contract negotiations, we haven't come to an impasse. We've agreed on a benefits package for everyone.
Have your union members seen a drop in wages combined with increased health care and retirement premiums? Let's take the decrease in wages. Has that happened at all?
No, we haven't seen a decrease in wages as far as hourly wage. That has either remained constant. We have been able to negotiate a 1% to 2% pay increase over the years here. So hourly wise, no, we haven't seen a decrease that way in wages. But when you factor in the healthcare premiums and the retirement benefits, then there is a decrease in overall wages. And that would be directly attributed to the implementation of Act 10 4 years ago. Although the police and fire and transit employees were all exempt from that, that has bled over into our unions as well. Cities and counties across the state have used the Act 10 as kind of as a backdrop for saying this is what you guys should have because the rest of the city employees, county employees have got this as well. And so they use that as a bit of leverage, I guess, during negotiations. So it's had a definite impact. We have seen an increase in the amount we pay for our health insurance and the amount we now have to pay into our retirement benefits. So that comes directly out of our bottom line. So overall, our wages are down, yes, but not, like I said, the hourly rate.
Yeah. Have you seen an increased turnover in transit drivers or fewer people applying for those positions because of Act 10 and the political climate here?
Yeah, we have. With some of the recent retirements that we've had, there's been some openings filled, and with discussions with management about filling those positions, there are far less people that are actually applying now for those positions. It used to be 50 plus that would apply for any open position, and now you're down into the probably 20 or less range. And qualified candidates are becoming harder and harder to find too, from what I understand.
This question is a little tricky to answer, so please, you don't want to mention any names. I want to keep you out of trouble.
Okay.
I'm the one who gets into trouble, not you, okay? But do you or your members believe that there are those in the state legislature who do not have the best interest of the transit employees at heart?
Oh yeah, we do. And again, I think you can look back to 4 years ago when Act 10 was implemented, and I think it would be fair to say that those that were in favor of and voted for Act 10 would be against transit employees. A feeling we get is that there are some in the legislature who feel as though transit is another form of entitlement, to where all you're doing is getting a free ride somewhere or a very, very cheap ride somewhere, and what you should do is pull yourself up by the bootstraps, get out there, get a good paying job, and get a vehicle and drive yourself to work. But that's not the case at all. That's far from the truth. So yeah, there's a pretty strong feeling amongst our members that there are those in the legislature that would, and I wouldn't say necessarily it would be held to just the transit operators. I think it would be unions in general that.
Imagine that. I pick up the same feeling. So, what about the Eau Claire City Council? Are there people on the Eau Claire City Council who do not have your best interests at heart, or is that not the case?
No, I wouldn't say that they don't have our best interests at heart. There are those that I don't want to say anti-union, but are would prefer we didn't have that great ability to negotiate like we do. But you'll have that in any form of government, I guess. So I can't pinpoint that there are definite people on the Eau Claire City Council that are anti union or anti-transit in general. But I think overall we think we have a pretty good council.
Would it be safe to describe them as fiscally conservative, and that's about it?
Yeah, that would be a good way to describe them.
Okay. And let's see, is there anything else you'd like to add? I'm certain that with your experience as the president of your local, you have a few things you could contribute to this conversation. Because I'm sure you get a lot of complaints from your union members about this and that and that and this.
Oh yeah, we have our complaints.
What are their concerns?
The biggest concern is with what's happened in the past, over the past 4 years, since Governor Walker was elected, is the fear that not only or that Act 10 will now no longer only affect the other people, but it'll affect us. And what I mean by that is the fear of the legislation that could be enacted to turn Wisconsin into a right-to-work state. That would really be our biggest fear that we have. And then, of course, we would be no different than anyone else. That's what most of the talk is now amongst members, is what's going to happen if we get another 4 years of Governor Walker. Our members, and I'm sure most members of any union, understand the importance of a union and having a union, and I'm not sure everyone in the state realizes that. I'm sure you know how important unions are, but I don't think everyone does. Unions go back a long ways, and without them, wages would not be where they're at for many people in the private sector.
Collective bargaining, right there.
Correct.
Something that just occurred to me is that a lot of people will assume that becoming a bus driver, a transit driver, is pretty easy. I don't think so. Those buses are awful, awful big. And there's no way you'd get me behind the wheel. And it just wouldn't be a sane thing to do. So there's got to be some training involved, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And that means if you lose transit drivers, you're losing trained people, correct? And it takes time to train these people. Would you care to elaborate at all?
Yeah, sure. It does. There is a lot of training that's involved with becoming a bus operator. It's a pretty big responsibility when you're hauling people around. You have people's lives at stake. So, and there's a lot of hours that go into training. One of the difficulties too with driving a bus is making sure that there's somebody behind the wheel all the time. And so we have a lot of part-time operators that, and full-time operators as well, that end up working split shifts. So you may come in the morning for 2-3 hours only, and then not come back till late in the afternoon for 2-3 hours. And that can be difficult to find people who are able to live that kind of a lifestyle. And because you're needed at any given time of the day, it's almost impossible to hold a second job. And so it gets difficult for them to keep people just because of the hours of operation that we have and the hours that are required for people to come in on a split shift like that. And there are times when we've gone through periods where a driver would only stick around for 6 months and said, I can't do this anymore just because the hours are a little awkward. And depending on when retirements come in, Sometimes you're only part-time for a little while, and then you get to move up into full-time when a spot comes available. But there are other people that have been part-time for 2-3 years before they've been able to actually get a full-time position. So that's the most difficult part is people don't realize the hours that they're getting into when they get hired as an employee. So
How long have you been an employee of the Eau Claire Transit System?
17 years.
17 years. And you have a family to support, I assume?
I do, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I assume that's sometimes it can be a little difficult, depending upon the wages.
Oh yeah, yeah. Fortunately, when I started out part-time, I only had one daughter at that time, so it worked out okay with me, and I was only part-time for 7 months, and so I was one of the fortunate ones. But that's another difficult situation for many of the new hirees is when you have family members, how do you work that into the schedule to be able to get to their ball games and their school functions, and so that because of having the split shifts where you're working early in the morning, so you can't see them off on the bus to school, and then you're working later in the afternoon, so you can't go to their games, which is another reason why people would leave after just a few months.
It hurts the kids.
Sure.
We've heard rumors about public employees making $100,000, $200,000 a year, becoming millionaires. Have you met any public employees who are millionaires lately, or in the last 17 years?
No, not lately. I haven't.
Because if you have, I'd like to apply.
Right, as well I would too. No, and I've heard those stories. In fact, there were some bus operators down in the Madison transit system that were making over $100,000 a year. When you look at it like that, if you just throw that number out there and say you've got a bus operator who's making over $100,000 a year, in fact, I think there was 2 down in Madison that were making more than the transit manager itself. Mm-hmm. Well, if you just said that and left it at that, you could think, wow, those guys are making way too much money, and those are taxpayer dollars, and they shouldn't be getting paid that well. But there needs to be more information, because the truth is that although they did make that much money, it wasn't made working 40 hours a week.
Overtime.
There was lots of overtime.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And that the situations that occur are that the transit systems don't want to or are unable to fill all of the full-time positions, so they need people behind the seat. When you have hours of operation, there has to be someone in there. Just like a hospital has to have people there to take care of the sick people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, your transit system is the same way. You can't just say, well, we don't have anybody to work during this time. So that's where all that overtime comes in. And there are some people who obviously didn't need a family life or don't have a family life and were willing to work 60, 70 hours a week just to be able to get that kind of money. So that's where that money comes from. Mm-hmm. But there aren't too many millionaires driving bus that I know of.
I suspect that when somebody is putting in that much overtime, there must be some fatigue involved as well. And that could be dangerous for the bus driver, the passengers, and the public at large.
Oh, it is, definitely, yep. Our international office has actually been on the forefront of that with the driver fatigue and the number of hours that they're requiring drivers to be behind the wheel. And the short amount of time off, too, working late shifts till 11 o'clock, midnight, and then having to be back to work at 5 a.m., and so you don't get a full 8 hours worth of sleep. We've tried to address that personally in our contract negotiations, and we were successful in doing that so that there was no scheduled hours with at least a minimum of 8 hours off in between, which works out great for us. But that is an issue amongst not just locally here in Eau Claire, but across the United States. Like I said, our international has addressed that issue. That one, and the second big one is assaults on bus operators. Now, here in Eau Claire, we've got a nice, friendly community, but in some of the bigger cities, it's not so. And there's quite a few assaults that happen to drivers. It's a big issue.
I could imagine. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything I've forgotten to ask, or you've forgotten to mention, or if you just like to hear yourself talk, go right ahead, because we do engage in some humor here.
Okay.
I'm not as serious as I look, so.
Well, I'm a little disheartened that you didn't invite me later for this, so we could have done some karaoke together. I understand that starts at 9. But
We want to keep our audience.
okay.
We want to keep our audience.
But I guess one thing I'd like to add is just the importance of a transit system in a community, and that people out there rely on this as their only means of transportation. And it's vital to communities. And it's easy for you or I to jump into a vehicle anytime we want and go anywhere for whatever reason we need to. But there's a large segment of society that can't afford to do that. And it's not just those people that want to be environmentally conscious and ride the bus because they don't want to pollute our air with all the smog from their vehicle. It's the majority of the people that ride transit systems are doing it because that's their only means of transportation.
I suspect you get a fair share of disabled passengers as well.
We do.
And accommodations are made for those, for the disabled?
Yep, very much so, yep. All of our buses are ADA equipped, so anyone in a wheelchair or any kind of mobility device can get on the bus and be secured properly and feel safe. Actually, on that, we have a new system here in Eau Claire. It was donated to us. It's called a Q-Straint, and it's a new system to where passengers can get on with their mobility device and actually secure themselves in. It's all electronically controlled, and they can to maneuver their scooter or wheelchair into position and hit a button, and an electronic arm comes down and secures them into place, and then the driver only has to help them with getting their seatbelt on and shoulder restraint. Really slick, quick operation, and very secure, very safe. Had good feedback from it. The passengers really feel comfortable using it. It has been used in Canada quite heavily, I understand, and one other city, I can't remember where it was, here in the United States, but Eau Claire is only the second city to get it. So.
And I imagine this allows some of your passengers to maintain their dignity and pride as well.
Correct, yeah. And that's a big thing. Like I said, you and I, we can get up and do whatever we want to do when we want to do it because we have a vehicle, and this allows them to have that same feeling, that same dignity, so that they can go whenever they want to, wherever they want to. And that's another thing that we hear with, back to your earlier question about the expansion. That's one of the things that we hear a lot about, is expanding our service so that not only does it go out further, but it's also more frequent, so that people have that freedom to be able to get about their daily lives.
Well, Florian, that just about wraps it up for me. I just want to emphasize one thing, that I did learn how to pronounce your last name correctly, Skwarczynski.
That's correct.
Did I get it right?
You did.
I did?
But don't worry, John. I even have trouble with it sometimes. So.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Again, Florian Skwarczynski. He's with Transit Local 1310 of the Amalgamated Transit Union. Your local bus drivers, thank you very much.
Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cbctv.org.